Hi, Kaya here with the lovely Mia Mendoza, a longtime friend, college, and roommate. Um, once we one ago, so it happens to be third episode and the latest of what we're doing here. So we're interviewing badass women, badass business women, or in this case, badass women who are in the nonprofit field. So Mia,
Hi.
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 This is something that I've been wanting to do with the ladies that I met in Agora Crisis Center, especially you coming into this because you and I met at Agora Crisis Center, but we weren't like instant friends. We sat a couple shifts together, and then we got closer, and then we were training together. We worked together.
We had like
And then we
classes
lived
together
together.
and like never talked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
You double majored in psychology and religion.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that I remember the first time you and I had talked about it. I thought, oh my God, this woman is a go-getter. Someone who double majors in anything is like just crazy, but really involved. But also that you have this want to learn a lot about the world. It seems like because psychology and religion are two huge things in life, and that was immediately something that I learned about you in that moment. And I don't remember what class it was. I want to say it was a sociology class, but I can't remember now. All right. So, yeah. So I'm going to go look at my notes for a second
Okay.
and hopping back and forth. So don't mind me if I keep looking like I'm doing this, but this is what
Okay.
you got your degree in psych and religious studies. What made you want to pursue social work, and tell us about like what the difference is in the social work that you're pursuing versus other master's degrees in social work, that the details where you do.
Okay. So the first question is like how did my undergrad lead into social work? Is that right? Okay. It didn't. so so yeah, I think sorry, my phone just went off. I think that my initial plan with my undergrad is not what I ended up doing. But I think the experience that my psychology degree got me and a job led me to want to go into social work. So psychology is very broad, right? And it's just the study of people and people in their environment. And honestly, so is religious studies, just a different lens. And so then I got a job with that, doing the only thing I could do. And then, I was a guardian, right, with that. And then the first time I went to grad school, it was for counseling. And then I realized I didn't want to be a counselor. Uh, because
So what made you realize that you didn't want to be a counselor? Because I know with me it was just wanting to get out a little more, and in case people didn't know, I was a little bit of a caseworker for a minute, and now I'm not. And I'm
sorry for outing you.
What made you change your mind?
So I think it was a lot of frustration with the world on it, like, and a lot of just like anger and angst, to be totally honest. So I think counseling is very much like working on the individual, right? And so what I realized was happening is that even in like preliminary work as a counselor or internships or the very beginning of that kind of career, I would see people and work on their trauma or work on their anxiety. And then I would send them back out into the same broken world that they came from, right? And I felt like I was helping them exist in a broken space, right? Which I think social work can also be guilty of, which is a pretty radical thing to say. But for example, like I was working with people who had just been released from prison and were experiencing oppression and had been experiencing oppression their whole lives. And so I would work on like the anxiety from that, but then the system wasn't changing. Like they had to change, but the system didn't. So I went back for social work. But to answer your second question, the social work that I wanted to do is very similar to public health. And it's looking at kind of like addressing like the big umbrella systems that are very broken. So how do we address education? How do we address mass incarceration? How do we address our broken healthcare system? Right now, how do we address policies like the immigration debacle or at like the student loan debacle, right? And the kind of social work that I am very interested in and that I got my degree in focuses on that, those big like public health issues and the policies behind them. And it's also heavily focused on like nonprofit management because nonprofits tend to exist in the spaces where the government's not really stepping in and handling things well. And so that's where like nonprofits kind of squeeze in and handle stuff.
So you were the program coordinator head of an operation here in New Mexico,
Yeah.
head of what's called Faces. And we initially talked about you getting the position, and you, I remember you were talking about how like honored but like nerve-wracked you were about like starting something in New Mexico. You're really literally the first person to be doing this, the Faces of the Future. And how was that? How did that start? Because when I left New Mexico, it was when you were starting this, and
Mm-hmm.
how has it grown from then to now for you?
Oh man. So I work with what we call in like the public health world underserved and underrepresented high school youth, which is basically just a fancy. I work with youth who have experienced a lot of hard stuff in life, right? Who come from, for example, the average household size of, this is just the way the data works out. The average household size that I work with is 5. The average household income is like $31,000 a year, right? So that gives you a perspective. Most, like 90% of the youth I work with are minorities. Many are first generation. Many are undocumented. And so I do all the things that you just said I did, and then I connect them to healthcare internships and lots of other stuff. There's so many parts to it. So when it started, it was just a few schools in Albuquerque that were interested, and me, and us saying, okay, like how do we run a program with all 3 of these schools? And how do we recruit youth? How do we educate the youth within the classroom? And how do we kind of strategically connect them to resources in their community, to mentors in their community, and then get them into college, right? Or a job if that's what they want to do right after. And so it started off as just an idea with money, with a grant behind it to fund my salary basically for 3 years, 4 years. And so it went from that to me just piecing things together at the 3 schools and connecting youth with community clinics. So in the first year of the program, they were literally going to like 16 different places, which really was ineffective because transportation in Albuquerque is awful. And now, so fast forward, I'm still working with all 3 of those schools. The program has grown from starting with 12 students in the first year to now I have a solid cohort of about 40, and I work with over 100 through education programs every year. I have a summer program through our community college. I partner with the University of New Mexico, and our main partners now are is Loveless Hospital Systems, so the whole hospital network, and first choice clinics, so students get a balance of like community healthcare and hospital healthcare. The program's become a lot more recognized. We've been in like the news, we've been in newsletters. We've had people from like other states contact me and say like, hey, I want to do what you're doing. Yeah, other communities have been really excited about it. So it's grown a lot. And but it's a nonprofit, so we're still looking for like funding to expand, and it's exciting, but it's stressful because I'm still one person doing all of it.
How what were you feeling when you were 17 versus what you're feeling now, and what would you tell someone who's
Right.
16, you know?
Yeah, which that's interesting that you bring that up because a lot of my job is talking to 16, 17, 18-year-olds all the time, right? And I kind of have this moment of like, what did I need to hear? Because I think that you identified this really important thing in me that I think I've always had. That's I don't know if it's good or bad. It just is, but it's this drive to like make something with my life in as little amount of time as I have, right? And that I can't like not live up to that potential, which when I was young was exhausting. I would tell younger Mia, like, don't get 2 degrees in 4 years. You don't need to do that, right? Like, that's crazy. You don't need to take a full load of summer school classes. Like, you can have more fun. And like that caught up to me, right? I didn't travel as much as I wanted to. I didn't experience as much as I wanted to. And so I think that there was this like this drive in me to learn and to do and to make something and to help, right? And it pushed me to get those 2 degrees. It pushed me to do Agora, which was one of the most influential things and still is that I've ever done. And those are good. Like the degrees helped, and Agora shaped the rest of my life. And that thread of being really driven has carried, and it is now. But I'm not going to kill myself over it anymore. Like, I'm not going to sacrifice my well-being for the world anymore because it's not healthy and it's not good. And I think the need to make something still exists. But what I've realized is that um, you I don't know, this might get too weird, but I think we both overestimate and underestimate our impact, right? Like I work with teenagers and I underestimate the impact that I have in their lives by being somebody that believes in them, but I overestimate the impact that my program has in shaping the rest of their lives. I don't know if they're going to become medical professionals, right? Like, I don't know what that's going to do, but what I do know is that they know that there's somebody on their side, and that matters. But I mean, it all connects together if I look at it, right? Like, everything I've done connects together. But I think one thing that I've really learned being in the position that I'm in now, in the third year of doing this program, is that I can't, I can't sacrifice myself. Like, I have to find that balance. And younger me, I had no idea what that was. This idea of I'm like the first person in my family to get and like a higher education, right? And there's like all this pressure in our society that we were told of, like, you have to go to school and you have to succeed and you have to do all these things. But like success isn't exhausting yourself. It's not like burning yourself out over a job, right? It's being well-rounded and even. And and yeah, like grad school was horrible. I was so tired, and the way that grad school is set up is really to push people to their limits. And I definitely felt that, right? And then I realized that I didn't want to keep doing that to myself.
I do remember one time you and I were talking like on the couch, and you were just saying there was one class, and if you want to, you can get into it. If not, that's okay. I can cut this out. But there was one class that you said that it really got to your core of who you were as a person to be analyzed in such a way and talked, and then you had to reflect on your entire childhood history and everything. It was something that I remember to this day and thought, wow, I don't think I've ever had something even as close to an experience of having to reflect on myself. Do you still think those are I mean, like, you can talk about, like, if you want, what it was like, or just how it is in getting a master's degree and that class in general and doing all that, and how
Yeah.
really close
I
it
don't
is.
I don't mind talking about that. I think that was in my I think that was in my soul. Was it in my social work degree? I think because I know the class you're talking about, or if I think this is what you're talking about, was
They must do
had,
it on the daily then. I remember I want to say you had to write a paper about yourself too.
yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about. So that was in. It was like the second year of my. I think it was this, or maybe it was the end of the first year of my social work program, and we had to do this thing where we had to analyze our life thus far. So how I don't know how old was I, 20, 25 years of my life, based on like human development and whether or not we flourished, or like all these negative things that impacted us and how they impacted us based on like stages of development and like adverse childhood experiences and biological factors and like if our parents were nurturing. And it was like this giant project and had to be like a 30-page paper, right? And we had to look at like how are we treated like in utero, what kind of nutrition did we get, were our parents good to us, blah 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 blah, like how are our friends situations, and really get into the weeds of that, right? And that was so hard. And actually, I don't think I told you this, but that was the last time that they made that assignment like mandatory because it was so emotionally just like distressing for people. Um, and when I said, which is probably ethical, I think that's good. But it was interesting because I think I don't know if it was ethical to have us do that. But I do think that it's important for anybody that goes into any sort of helping profession to understand where they come from and to address their own shit. I mean, I think you know this, right? I mean, how many people become counselors because they're like, oh, yeah, I was abused as a child and I want to help people that were abused as a child. Like, I don't think that's healthy unless you've done a ton of work. Um, and so doing stuff like that was really hard. And I think graduate school challenges you to look at yourself in a different way. But I think what's harder about graduate school is the amount of work, right? And I think that's true in most graduate school programs, but specifically like behavioral health programs and medical programs, like the balance of all the work that you have to do on top of like an internship, on top of working, on top of surviving is just insane. Like, and that's how we push people. We push people um, to like we put this prestigious thing on like this degree over here is the best thing that you can ever do, but we're going to push you to the point of a breakdown to get it. And I don't think there's any glory in that, honestly. One thing that I do now is I'm a community faculty member for UNM's med school, and I mentor med students, and like the things that they tell me they're going through just to get through med school, right? It's insane. And it's not even like the studies, it's the balance of everything. And I think we really push people, and then we like assign some fancy like we glorify their suffering, right? And I just think that's kind of crappy.
Okay, so scoot over just a tiny. Just,
I
just scoot
can't,
your
I'm
camera
like
over.
on my bed. Sit.
Okay, okay, it's gonna be fun. I kind of Facebook stalked you a little bit since I've been gone, but since I'm being on social media, both Facebook and Instagram, I've seen a lot of posts regarding the amount of like kids that you've had and happy groups of like graduates,
Hmm.
and how you've basically been a leader for them and showing them all these things. I just wanted to ask, like, what kind of challenges have there been with the students, or like what is maybe a story that you thought was really cute and thoughtful, or just really life changing?
Oh God, there's so many. So I want to say I'm a big fan of the book The Little Prince because it shows that adults are the problem, and that's true in my job. Adults are always the problem. I'm working with kids who, uh, yeah, they might come to the program with a 1.7 GPA, or they're homeless or they're in a gang, but they're not the problem, right? Like the kids that I work with. This is like they know that this is a huge opportunity and this program will connect them to what they need to succeed in the future, right? And they are humble and excited and proud, and they're crying when they graduate and they get their little blue coats for their internships. And so the challenges that I face are and I think the emotional toll that I experience in my job is because the odds are stacked against them, right? And the odds are stacked against them because I hear every single day, Miss, I don't know how I'm going to pay for school. Or
Mhm.
I mean, I have several students that have literally applied for 50 plus scholarships, right? And they're pulling together $200 here, $500 here to fund their education, because it's the only way they can go to school. I have students who work 40 hours a week and go to high school. They go to work right after school, and they get a few hours of sleep and then do it all over again. I think the most touching thing that I experience is I work with a lot of students who are first generation here, and I work with their families and hearing, you know, the transition of when I first interview them, of them saying, you know, I want to be a nurse because a nurse saved my dad's life when he was in an accident, and I saw that and I want to give that back. But I don't know that I can, because all I've ever seen is working in the food industry, the service industry, the hotel industry, and that's all I think I can do. And then they get into school, and then, you know, they're able to pursue that. But um, you know, I think the hardest thing is that the odds are against them. Again, I work with a lot of students who are undocumented, and, you know, they are the brightest, most resilient people I've ever met. And I don't know what's going to happen to them. I have students who qualify for DACA but can't get it because our administration cut that off right before they could apply, or as they were applying. Um, so I think a story that I have is that I worked. She just graduated, and she wants to be a social worker, so of course she's my favorite, right? But I have a student who she's going to a 4-year university right now, but she um, is or she did actually by some miracle get DACA after they cut it off. But there was a while where she didn't have it, and she just took every opportunity available to her. You know, like every mentor, she made sure that they knew who she was. She participated in everything, volunteered for everything, and applied for every scholarship. She got her education funded with scholarships. She made these great connections. She has people that, you know, would hire her in a heartbeat. And just to watch her kind of capture everything that she can was really inspiring, and hear her talk about her story, and to see her mom crying and her little siblings look up to her was really powerful stuff, because she's her story is not that uncommon. You know, she's just like thousands of other students here in Albuquerque and millions across the country, right? But she's tenacious and optimistic, and I think that really touched me.
I feel like you found what you wanted to do in life. Is this something?
I hope so. I mean, to be completely honest, I get terrified all the time of like, oh my God, what do I do after this? You know, I think I've discovered what I'm super passionate about, and that's education access, right? Creating opportunity for people to get an education, I think is something that I can't see myself really loving something a whole lot more, although I'm interested in a ton of things, and who knows. Um, but super passionate about that, and about working with high schoolers. I always said I never wanted to work with kids, and that's because of, I think, my own personal life. But I wouldn't work with anybody younger, and I don't think I want to work with adults again. So, because they just, there's something that's lost between the ages of like 20 and 25. It just like seeps out of us somehow, and I don't know what happens there. But I think so. I think that I really love working with them, and they remind me what's good in the world all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's something that I haven't felt in a little bit too, just because one, I miss Albuquerque.
Mm.
To Albuquerque, I want to tell those Pacific Northwesters who happen to be watching, Albuquerque is something completely different
Oh yeah.
than any other city. And I haven't been to many, but any other city, especially Portland, there's a culture there. There's something that's a little more community oriented, despite the um, socioeconomic rankings or like where we're at. Um, there's this community of people who watch each other's backs, and it really plays through in things that you do, like with nonprofits or War Crisis Center, or just in your neighborhood. You know, it's something that's different from Portland. I'm not saying Portland is at all any sort of anything else but weird, because they are weird, and we're a group of weird people. But um there's something that I miss. It's just
Yeah.
something I miss. With all that said in mind, you talk about everyone else a lot, and you've always talked about like your concern for others. But what about you? How have you felt this whole time? You know what I mean?
I really love these questions. You're like in it. If you ever want to start a podcast, let's do it.
I thought about a podcast. It'd be a lot easier than trying to edit
Yeah,
all.
I'm sure. I'm sure that is a really good. Thank you. Nobody asked me that, and I want to say, like, nobody asks the helpers and the creators of the world, like, how are you doing, right? And I actually get on my soapbox a lot about that a lot, because we look at young motivated people who do good things and we're like, oh, they're amazing, and we hold them up on these pedestals, right? But I guarantee you, 8 times out of 10, like easy 80% of the time, there is a lot of dark stuff that is motivating that person to be great at a young age, and we don't talk about that, and it drives me insane. So, one, my life, I've had a crazy life, which you know, some of, and it has gotten really calm over the last 2 years specifically, and that has been the greatest gift of that I've ever given myself, is just existing in calmness, and recognizing the value of things like being alone, for God's sakes. And that's been amazing. So, and I think there's something to be said for age, right? Like I think you just grow up, maybe. I think I'm a few things. One, I'm more grounded than I've ever been. Two, I have really powerful perspective on what matters and what doesn't, and I think it's because of the youth that I work with. I think I have a lot of perspective on my life and things like my family and my childhood, and things that I'm able to let go of. I made some really powerful decisions over the last 2 years to kind of reflect that. Um, but in a personal sense, I'm good, right? Like I'm good. In a different sense, though, I'm feeling what we're all feeling, which you probably saw on Facebook. I have student loan debt that I don't know if I'll ever pay off, and it will burden me for the rest of my life. I don't know if I can buy a house. I don't know if I can have children, or support them, at least. I don't know what I would do if my car it breaks down. I stress about money all the time, and for God's sakes, I make a pretty decent salary, especially for New Mexico, right? Um, and I'm really frustrated with the world, right? I definitely cry in my car at least once a week about these big things. Living in a border state right now is really heartbreaking, and I'm feeling that definitely. There are things happening here that are I never thought we would get here. And so personally, I'm great, uh, but existing in this world right now is really hard. So, and being a social worker in the place that we're at and working with the youth that I do is really hard. So, yeah.
That is one thing that I think a lot of us now struggle with. Um, I work with people who are of a lot of varying age ranges, but a lot of the consensus of where I work is can be anywhere from like, oh, well, you are just you millennials, just like shrugging it off, and
No.
it's like, yeah, right, us millennials. But we do have to think about things that are shoved in our faces every day that was not shoved in people's faces last generation.
No.
These things of just like I don't even know how to, like, there's so much that I like. People tend to react in like one of a few ways, and my reaction to it has been just sort of shutting it down, because I can't seem to get, if I can't even get myself okay, then how am I supposed to think about this other? Or waking up and feeling like, I'm personally all right, but what about the billions of people that aren't okay, that wake up under nothing, no homeless people, or wake up in another country and there's bombs everywhere. Like the things that we have to think about all the time, it seemed to be, I don't know, I guess depressing millennials a lot more than people of the previous generations.
Yeah.
It's I don't know if the access to social media because of that, Twitter, Facebook.
Right.
I don't know how to get out of, there's one thing that's like get your head out of your ass, but there's another thing of like getting your head out of everything else so that you can at least become a somewhat okay human being.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how we do that. Honestly, I get really frustrated when the older generations say that we're being whiny because that's nonsense. Like we're in a really, really bad place right now. We're in a really bad place. And I think that we're in this weird sandwich generation where the younger generation than us has never known anything but things being bad, right? And the older generation knew like things being bad, but also they had a revolution for God's sakes. Like they organized. They had the civil rights movement. They had ending Vietnam. They had the the 60s and the 70s, and then they had the 90s, right? They were like older than we were in the 90s and had that prosperity. And we have their talk of like the American dream and follow what you want to do, and you have to get an education and you have to get a job and you have to make a lot of money and do all these things, and that was spit on us for our entire childhood, and that's especially true for minorities, right? In which we are. And the pressure that we felt on that, and then we did it during a recession, and now things are hard. And I definitely think that we were dealt a bad hand. So I get frustrated when that's minimized because I think we're doing a pretty damn good job, all things considered. I mean, we should vote more, but you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That is something that I want to relate to you on, that I wake up and I'm just like, I don't know how anybody else does it. How am I supposed to do it? So
I don't know. Yeah.
that's maybe that's something that's different about us than a couple generations, than that we're able to say what we feel a little more generously and compassionately respond to those, because we're not all okay, but we don't need to hide it, because the last thing I remember is, you know, male family members of mine always having nothing to say. And
Yeah.
because of that, that really put a strain on the entire family unit
Yeah.
for that. So that's something I think we can all get better at, but also expressing and hopefully helping. I think you have such a big heart and such a big want to help that it can be a little detrimental. It's okay to be selfish a little bit, but it's you are one of the kindest people I know, and I thank you for having this interview with me. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or wanted to say, like that was going on, or things that you do that you sort of wanted to explain further?
Well, I did want to comment on thank you for what you said about Albuquerque. I think people miss that a lot, right? We certainly have a lot of problems, but there is something very distinct here, right? The sense of community and how people support each other. And I have not heard a single person move away not say what you just said, that they miss that, right? They miss the closeness. So thanks for that. I think I think I do want to just say one thing about um, I think we're finally getting a lot of really powerful female role models in the world, like Jamila Jamil, right? Getting out there and bashing like the diet industry, and Lizzo being a fucking badass on the Video Music Awards or whatever. But I think what all of these really powerful women have in common, what you and I have in common, one of the things, what if anybody that starts to recognize that they're a powerful woman is, and that they have a voice, is that they're always in transition, right? And we need to give ourselves a lot of grace in that we are not just one thing, right? That we will continue to change and adapt and grow, and we will fail. And there will be days when we don't want to get out of bed and we don't want to use that voice, and that's okay too. But I think it's really important to recognize that powerful women come from a lot of transitions. Um, and we need to be more honest about that as role models. We need to share that it wasn't clean to become who we are and to continue to become, right?
You're one of the reasons why I started doing this. You're amazing and wonderful, and continue doing what you're doing. And I know shit's hard, because it's hard for me. It's hard for everybody. I don't think it's ever going to not be hard, but I mean, like, hey, we're still checking on. But this little pet project of mine has been something of getting back to those roots of like talking to my community of women. So
Yeah.
that's I do for mental health reasons as well.
Yeah. Right. We need to surround ourselves with good people too. That's really
Mhm.
important, and honest people. So,
Yeah, truly.
yeah.
All right, so I'm going to end it here. Thank you guys all for watching. If you want to go ahead and follow my YouTube channel, you can click the link to subscribe or follow, or my Instagram. Usually my Instagram is the most anything. Did you want to plug anything?
Yeah. You can follow me on Instagram. It's just my dog and nature and music.
Yeah, I will link all of that down below and website for faces. So, all right, thank you guys so much. Have a good day.
Bye.